Good morning, everyone. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to officially welcome you to the CISPE Cloud Summit. It's a very exciting day. We have lots of interesting topics, insight, and news to share with you. And to get the day started, I'd like to really first announce our first speakers, our keynotes. Starting with the representative of the Spanish government and incoming Spanish presidency, Mr. Salvador Esteban Martinez, who we will see on the video here, who is the Director General for Digitalization and Artificial Intelligence of the Spanish government. He has recorded a small welcoming message that we will play. And then this keynote will be followed by our dear friend Pearse, who is director at DigiConnect, European Commission for Future Network. We have worked with Pearse on cloud issues for as long as I remember working on cloud issues. So that must be 2016 or something like that, starting on GDPR, SLA. So I'm really glad to have you back and to see that you've continued to follow these topics. And then, on behalf of CISPE, Cindy Chabal, who is head of communication for one of our members, Outscale, 3D Outscale, a French-based company, and a subsidiary of Dassault, will give us a little introduction before the first panel starts. So without further ado, I'll ask that we run the message from Mr. Esteban Martinez, which thank you.
To the Cloud Summit 2023. I'm Salvador Esteban. I'm Director General for Digitalization and AI, and it's my pleasure to open this meeting in representation of the Secretary of State, Carme Artigas. You all might know that this year is particularly important for Spain since we are going to lead the EU presidency. Let me say that we welcome the initiatives fostered by the cloud infrastructure service providers in Europe, and we celebrate the upcoming events such as the European Cloud Summit in November under the Gaia-X leadership, which will trace the path for the near present of digitalization. We all know that cloud solutions and infrastructure play a essential role to underpin European strategic autonomy and for the dual green and digital transition. They also represent a unique opportunity for the business fabric in our countries, and especially in terms of competitiveness and innovation capacity. The cloud sector also faces opportunities and risks, which must be tackled with a holistic point of view in order to reach and maximize the chances given by digitalization. In this context, we must also look into key topics around regulation, procedures, gender inclusion, how to gain certainty, and the need to create new robust and quality infrastructure for flexible and secure data management. Today's agenda will approach all this and will aim to achieving solutions in areas such as sustainability or green investments by data centers and cloud infrastructure providers to be the first EU industrial sector to become climate neutral. From our perspective, prior to the crisis, our government was already working towards this digital society we all want, as detailed in the digital strategy, Digital Spain 2025, and recently updated until 2026. This plan is our roadmap to ensure that we will be able to take advantage of the digital transformation, and together with the funds from the Recovery, Transformation and Resilience Plan to accelerate the technological change we might need. In this sense, Spain has been working to drive projects with a high impact and great change capability focused on transforming the digitalization of the economy and society. That's why, in line with this European data strategy, our country has fostered its own project to position as data hub to its favorable technological conditions. The Digital Agenda Spain 2026 also includes other programs under our office responsibilities, such as National Artificial Intelligence Strategy, National Digital Skills Plan, the SME Digitalization Plan, or the Public Administration Digitalization Plan. To make this possible, we are investing in generating a domestic industry around AI, or data, or cybersecurity, quantum computing, or green algorithms as keystones of the digital revolution. We are working on a digital and structural reform in strategic sectors such as employment, tourism, justice, or health. And we are aware that all the players must have a holistic point of view to take advantage of the synergies between the digital transformation process and the necessary energy transition as complementary processes. And that's the reason of the importance of the public-private collaboration, we could say. It ensures a real impact for the economy, but also for the employment and businesses. In this order of ideas, as the private sector is the catalyst to multiply the effects on the economy, we've decided to boost unprecedented reforms and investments, strengthening the Spanish entrepreneurship ecosystem in order to increase its productivity, its capabilities, and its resilience, and thus to contribute to the job creation, competitiveness, and economic growth. How? To foster the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Spain and to ease the procedures, we have focused on more agile legal framework, but also we have focused on growing in Spain. For instance, the next tech funds will help enterprises grow in size, investment, and ambition, with a total investment of 4 billion euros and more than 650 million that have already been invested. And I will also like to add that since Spain is assuming the EU presidency, we will have much to do regarding areas such as AI, cybersecurity, cyber resilience, and other. As you may know, Spain ranks 7th in the European Commission's Digital Economy and Society Index. Our leadership in infrastructures, the deployment of 5G, digital services, cybersecurity, and also the leadership in the field of AI, thanks to the Spanish AI sandbox, will make it possible to promote important, highly sensitive, and media-friendly dossiers during the Spanish presidency, which will mark the new digital economy in the EU. In particular, some examples of these files, acts to work on are first the AI Act, Artificial Intelligence Act, which legislates high-risk uses of AI systems. Spain, as I've mentioned before, has agreed with the European Commission to become the first regulatory sandbox in the EU. It is crucial due to the involvement of our upcoming presidency, and besides, this initiative is aligned with Spain's intention to foster development and use of responsible artificial intelligence within the Spanish national AI strategies. We also have the data regulation, which establishes fair principles for data sharing, B2B, B2G, G2B, and will mark an important milestone in European data legislation. It's going to be key in the further future. Or another one, Cyber Resilience Act, a new legislative framework for placing on the market all products with digital elements, hardware and software, and ensuring that they comply with information requirements for buyers and users and essential cybersecurity requirements throughout the life cycle of the product or service. In general, data will be key on the development of initiatives across Europe. For instance, we believe Data Act should become an essential tool in boosting the data economy with a level playing field in data flows across entities, sectors, and member states. Our goal in general is to drive digital transformation with the investments and reforms of the recovery plan to achieve a fairer society. We have a lot of work ahead to ensure a sustainable digital economy, digital society capable of facing the challenges to come. It's been an honor to open this summit. I give now the floor for the keynote speech and the welcome remarks. I wish you an excellent day and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. We will now proceed to our second keynote. Pearse O'Donoghue, please, you're welcome. I don't know if the microphone is a bit high for me, but maybe it's better for you. Yeah, maybe, try that. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesco. Good morning, everybody. It's an honor to be here. It's actually a pleasure to be back with our CISPE friends, my CISPE friends, after certainly a period of physical separation. As you have continued to do quite important work. And very much as a compliment to what the Director General just presented to us, I would like just to take a snapshot of where we are today and reflect on how things have evolved and how therefore the role of CISPE has evolved, just as the role of cloud has evolved. Because last week in the European Parliament, we had the vote on the Parliament opinion on the Data Act, which is an important stage when we come now into the negotiations between the Council and the Parliament with regard to the text of that very important piece of legislation. From the perspective of today, cloud, obviously I will not even attempt to deal with everything in the Data Act, nor would you want me, but one essential element is that it does provide for a legal framework to ensure that we have switching, cloud switching, free of charge, and that happens in an orderly and speedy process for all cloud users. Furthermore, particularly for many of you in the CISPE community, for providers of infrastructure as a service, it even also requires functional equivalence. Now, of course, there are limits to that, including and particularly with regard to the services or the infrastructure which is actually under the control of the original provider, and that's a very important carve-out to make it a reasonable and proportionate measure. But nevertheless, it is essential that we do give legal effect and also create the technical conditions with industry, with providers and users for this to be the case. Obviously, for providers of software as a service, the Data Act goes further or has further requirements with regard to harmonized standards or interoperability specifications as the transfer, the porting of the user's data is not just anymore something that can be done as an ASCII dump or in any sort of binary form. It has to be logically ordered so it can be reused. These requirements are something where we continue to work with industry, and I must stress again, with users, and therefore it is essential for us that we have interlocutors on both sides who are not just used to, but actually willing to work with one another, willing to take account of the needs and constraints of providers, the needs and constraints of the users. That hasn't always been the case. Francesco referred to work that we've done in the past, 2014, by the way, not 2016. And unfortunately, from time to time, despite the fact that the Commission has consistently sought to give a priority to codes of conduct, in other words, to self-regulation, because the experts are there and also because the technology is evolving so fast. Unfortunately, despite the huge efforts made by a number of people, including some people in this room, they haven't actually paid off. They haven't reached the results that we wanted to because of the role played or the attitude of a certain small number of influential providers to that process. And that's something which we had to take account of. Back in the Free Flow of Data Act, we gave, shall we say, the industry its last chance. And now in the Data Act, the Commission, justifiably, I would say that, chose that we had to act. But let's move on from the Data Act in order to reflect, now that we will have in place this free fluid switching, we remove one of the major contributors to vendor lock-in. And we already saw from the Eurostat work that the fear of lock-in was actually preventing people from adopting cloud services. And back to basics, our key objective is to ensure rapid and extensive uptake of cloud services, innovative, advanced cloud services. We have a goal in the digital decade that should be at least 75% of enterprises. We're nowhere near that. We have a lot to do with you in order to achieve that. But as we do, we need to reflect not just on the evolution of the regulatory environment, which you might think that we would be obsessed about, but actually the evolution of cloud services. So when we were talking with you, the industry, in the past about the need for cloud switching, the importance of cloud uptake, we all had a vision of this being small businesses and individual customers, consumers. But of course, that's not the case anymore. Apart from that being a vital core business, with all of the other technologies, some of which we just heard from our Spanish colleague, with regard to artificial intelligence, with regard to edge computing, with regard to industrial IoT, or some would call it the industrial metaverse, the need for advanced cloud computing services, infrastructure, platform, software, is essential for Europe to be able to benefit fully and exploit these technologies for the productivity and competitiveness gains that it provides. So let's never lose sight of what the objective is. It is to ensure widespread availability and competition in these advanced services. Just as I hope that the industry as a service sector develops and actually moves out to the edge along with the technology so that we can have the computing capacity with low latency, with high bandwidth in order to provide the technical means for availing of these new technologies that are so important for our generation. So from the time of the free flow of data regulation, when I met some of you first, where we made sure that data could move freely around Europe, to the Data Act, where we make sure that the user can move freely around the market. And let's face it, it's not a binary choice of one operator or another. We are already in the multi-cloud era, where as business plans become more sophisticated, as business users' needs becomes more sophisticated, it is likely that they will want to choose several providers of different services. And that is why the switching and portability provisions are just so important. And it's not just all about regulation. We have, as a basis for our work now, our Digital Decade program, in which we are hoping to have, as I've said, 75% of businesses by 2030 fully using cloud. We want 10,000 edge nodes operating in Europe to ensure that we have edge computing, providing that real-time, low-latency service that so many industrial applications will require. And we need to ensure that all of this is done in a secure environment, one that is respectful of our zero carbon objectives, and I will come back to that, in order to ensure that Europe has the best cloud and data continuum that we could hope for. Another element, as I said, is the trusted element. It's the cloud cybersecurity. It was the case that we had a scenario in which security risks could actually have put at jeopardy our plans for the development of cloud as a whole. Just as you saw that we encountered what was more than a severe speed bump with regard to the rollout of 5G, when we had to look even at some of the infrastructure that was being put into networks and had to go back and rip it out in order to ensure that this advanced technology would be secure from day one. These are challenges we can't ignore. We must not make the same mistakes again. But security by design, will be a crucial element of everything that you're doing. If you just look at the Cyber Resilience Act, which is the other and the last piece of legislation that we hope to see adopted already on the table, it is to admit that the weakest link is now the worst vector of attack. the dumb sensor, which has a low unit cost, can actually become the means for a very serious attack, denial of service or other, which we've already seen crippling health services, businesses and some other government services. So that is why, as we did with data protection, we had to say to ourselves, this is something which is going to impose a cost on the industry. But we have to accept that cost because this is an objective that we cannot turn our backs on. And of course, it is our role in creating a level playing field to ensure that any supplier or provider that does not fully follow those rules, in other words, take that cost on board, is excluded from the market. So that those progressive providers who have embraced the need for data protection, for security, and also now for low carbon objectives, will be rewarded on this single European market for advanced cloud services. And that's something which we can only do with you, again, the experts in this field. We are at the same time trying to help member states to understand this rapidly evolving market. We will be providing guidance with regard to public procurement. And we'd particularly like to acknowledge the role that CISPE has been playing, first of all at national level in helping governments and administrations to procure safely, but also to understand some of the process. But also the contribution that you are making to actually helping us to modernize and to have a clear and coherent strategy with regard to cloud public procurement, just as that technology continues to advance. So that guidance will be something which will be very useful, we hope also, in opening up what is a significant market for you, the providers, excuse me, which is, of course, the public sector. We are creating a marketplace, which is, of course, it's not very original, but it is one where users, particularly public sector users, will be able to identify application services and, of course, cloud products and services which do meet these European requirements. They can safely, thank you very much, they can safely make their procurement knowing that the services online have already been tested. And to bring this all together, I tried to make a dramatic effect yesterday, but it's not going to work. We are actually producing a cloud rule book, but I have to say immediately, it's not a new rule. We're not creating new proposals. What we're actually doing is we are trying to bring together a coherent but also transparent compendium of existing rules, standards, best practices, and codes of conduct which apply to cloud, which we hope will be useful to providers of cloud services, particularly the smaller providers in niche areas, but of course also the users, who can, on the basis of their own risk assessment, then identify what obligations they have or what they can expect a cloud provider to be doing in terms of their legal obligations as they seek to go onto the cloud. This will be a living document. For example, the first edition will not contain the provisions of the Data Act simply because it will not yet be in force, but we will be therefore updating this as things go on to ensure that that information is centrally located, visible and understandable. So that is something which we hope to do to contribute to what is a legitimate criticism that has been made sometimes about the extent of regulation that has been coming at you and users in recent times. We're also working with the cloud industry as a whole for the future, as you would expect. We have the Cloud Alliance for Data Edge and Cloud, which is bringing together European providers with a view to developing the technical vision and putting in place what is required for Europe to be competitive, to be in the lead, to have sovereignty, without in any way closing Europe as a market. We do not want that. It would be suicidal to do so. But it is rather creating the environment where, in a situation where, because of competitive strength, because of market evolution, European companies have found it very hard to compete with the three large hyperscalers who themselves have, of course, invested hugely in developing their technologies, but now benefit from that situation to the exclusion of others. And I can't finish without mentioning what I said at the start, which is the European Green Deal, but let's put it in concrete terms. It is ensuring not just energy efficiency, but improved energy efficiency of all stages, all links in the value chain, if you like, of the cloud compute environment. And that includes now, of course, also telecommunications and the access network, where not only can it be sufficient to maintain power consumption at current levels, it actually has to be driven down, just as the volume of data is increasing exponentially. That is a huge challenge. We have to work on this together. There are technological challenges, but also, again, there are market challenges which we must recognize. We must facilitate the best in class to actually gain an advantage from the work, from the efforts that they are prepared to undertake. We already have a code of conduct drawn up with industry, but with independent arbitration through our Joint Research Centre for data centres. And the Commission last October committed to doing exactly the same for communications and access networks, in other words, the telcos, to ensure that as they become more active in the cloud market, they too are subject to exactly the same rules, but also that telecommunications and compute and cloud together in this massive continuum at all points in the value chain are working to the best standards possible with regard to energy efficiency, to driving down the carbon footprint of this industry. So I'll stop there. I could go on. There's a lot happening. I know that you were involved. We want to maintain this dialogue because the regulatory landscape has become more complex, and that's our fault. We recognize that. I hope I've explained partly the reasons, the thinking behind it. We now have to ensure that that is implemented clearly, cleverly, and fairly, and we can only do that with you, the industry, working on the implementing measures, working on the expert groups, particularly with regard to switching, in order to ensure that it actually works, it achieves its purpose. And of course, we will need to regularly self-check to make sure that it is not having any unwarranted impacts, for example, in preventing companies from entering the market or driving down the rollout of cloud. So that is something where you will continue to have a role as an industry federation, independent of us, critical, but hopefully in a positive sense, so that we get this right, because the vision for the data-driven economy in Europe is one that we all share, but it is essential for our future. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Pearse. It was very insightful to hear you. I think we should invite you more often. Thank you again for this. And I didn't know it was 2014. Time flies, really. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Cindy Chabal from Outscale to give a word of introduction on behalf of the CISPE members. And please join me on stage. And the microphone is yours. I think ça va aller?
Perfect, yeah.
Merci.
Yeah, you are taller. Good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, I'm delighted to be with you today at this CISPE Summit. We are gathered today to discuss the future of cloud infrastructure in Europe. All of us here are aware that cloud infrastructure is a key element of European digital economy and plays an important role in the digital transformation of public and private organizations. It is therefore essential that we address the critical challenges facing the sector and find the appropriate measures to unlock Europe's potential for cloud innovation. So thank you for talking about that. I would like to reiterate that Europe is guided by strong values when it comes to protecting citizens' privacy and data. This is why I strongly support standouts such as the CISPE Code of Conduct for cloud service providers, which provides a clear compliance framework and a common set of best practices for the management of personal data. We must continue to be committed to GDPR compliance for all future regulations, especially with regards to the protection of health data in Europe, as they should not be exposed to extraterritorial laws under any circumstance. It is crucial that we put measures in place to ensure immunity for our European citizens' health data to preserve the highest level of data security in Europe. I am convinced that the implementation of the Gaia-X labels will play an important role in these objectives. Indeed, CISPE is a member of Gaia-X, as you know, and it is essential that these define and adopt labels level can be now implemented. So we need to work on that. This is why I am counting on the commitment of every CISPE members to promote and support those topics. We are here to discuss the future of cloud infrastructure in Europe, as I said, but we must not lose sight of the ultimate goal to ensure that digital innovation benefits first and foremost to all of Europe's citizens, while we can guarantee them their privacy and protecting their data. This requires close collaboration between industries, policymakers, and citizens, of course. Thank you for listening.